Hey guys, it's Chen. You know, we've seen a lot of things happen or get introduced to the world for the very first time, and this is because that's exciting, it's brand new, we all want to hear about it. And while history has a way of remembering the first of many things, like mankind's first flights or the first time we utilized electricity, not everyone has taken note of our definitive last instances. So in this video, we're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about 8 famous last things in the world which we may or may not ever see again. First off, the last telegram. There was a time when sending a telegram was the equivalent of today's text messaging, and when the first transcontinental telegraph line was constructed in the middle of the 19th century, it drastically shortened the time it took to deliver a message from one side of the country to the other. And it reached its peak in 1929 with more than 200 million telegrams sent all around the world. But then the telephones came, and that became the faster, more preferred means of communication in the middle of the 20th century, which was then replaced by, of course, the email. And in recent years, of course, that has transformed into the text message, and now what, Instagram, Facebook, that's what we use. Of course, progress is a double-edged sword, and the telegram became less and less relevant in the fast-paced world we live in. So Western Union decided to send the last telegram ever on Friday, January the 27th, 2006. Next, the last flight of the Concorde. Now, I really wish this still existed today. The Concorde was, of course, the turbojet passenger airliner established through the joint effort of the British and French governments. But only 16 aircrafts had been built, all of which had a supersonic speed of around 1,300 miles per hour. Wow, I just flew back from Taiwan, and I really wish this thing still existed. Anyway, it first flew in 1969, and it impressed the world for being able to transport passengers from New York to Paris in just under 3.5 hours. It officially entered service in 1976 and continued to operate for 27 years until its lack of commercial success and extremely expensive fares led to its eventual shutdown. Also, the Concorde crashed in 2000, which killed all of its 113 passengers, and the significant reduction in air travel following the events of 9/11 did not really help the situation. And so in October of 2003, the Concorde made its last trip ever, flying from New York to London with 100 celebrities on board to see the aircraft off before its retirement. Number 3, the last Olympics to give solid gold medals. Have you ever wondered if an Olympic gold medal is actually, made of gold? Of course, winning a gold medal from competing in the Olympics is an amazing feat that no material item can ever match. However, without discrediting the value of the award, you might be surprised to know that gold medals are more of sterling silver than pure genuine gold. Today, these highly coveted medals are plated with just a minimum of 6 grams of gold. But in the past, Olympic champions were giving medals entirely made from actual gold. This started in the 1904 Olympics, continued on in 1908, and occurred for the final time in the 1912 Olympic Games, which was held in Stockholm, Sweden. Number 4, and I love this, the last cigarettes ad on TV. Of course, we no longer see TV advertisements for cigarettes today, but they were once a frequent featured product on television, and the tobacco companies were the largest advertisers on this media platform. Then, on April Fool's Day in 1970, President Nixon signed the Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act, which banned TV and radio advertisements that featured cigarettes. The law officially came into effect on January the 2nd, 1971, and 1 minute before midnight on January 2nd, the Virginia Slims brand aired the last cigarette commercial during a break on The Tonight Show. Smokeless tobacco ads continued to air for several years after that, before a complete ban was implemented in 1986. Since then, Big Tobacco focused its advertising efforts in other medias such as newspapers and magazines. In 2010, however, the first electronic cigarette commercial graced the TV screen, though some may not count it as the official return of cigarette ads on television, as they don't identify e-cigarettes to be the same as tobacco. Next, the last U.S. state to abolish slavery. The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution formally abolished slavery in the country when it was passed and ratified in 1865. However, the state of Mississippi did not really get on board with ratifying the amendment right away. In fact, they officially did so 148 years too late, and that was really only because concerned Mississippi residents were inspired by the 2012 film Lincoln to make it happen. Anyway, lawmakers of the state voted for the amendment's ratification in 1995, but they didn't make the effort to finish the job, failing to notify the U.S. archivist to make the vote official. A few locals reached out to the Mississippi Secretary of State, and it was only then that a copy of the 1995 resolution was sent to the Federal Register, finally making the ratification abolishing slavery official and final. Number 6, the last man on the moon. We all remember the first man to walk on the moon, and the honor goes to, of course, Neil Armstrong. But do you know who was the last person to have walked on the surface? Well, that particular honor goes to Eugene Andrew Cernan, an American astronaut who landed on the moon twice. He was the one who commanded the Apollo 17 mission in December of 1972, the final Apollo lunar landing. He was also the one who uttered the last words from the moon. Cernan passed away in January of 2017, and though he currently holds the label of being the last man on the moon, he may no longer have that title in the near future, because mankind is of course making a return to the moon, with China making preparations for its first manned lunar mission, which they set to complete by 2036. Number 7, the last married pope. In the Roman Catholic Church, priests are generally required to be celibate, but there have been instances throughout the history of Christianity in which married priests were chosen to assume the papacy. The last married pope was Adrian II, who led the church for 5 years following his ascension to the papal throne in 867. He was already married to his wife Stefina and had a child with her before he became the pope. And following his election to the papacy, Adrian II had refused to become celibate or abandon his family. Finally, number 8, and thank goodness, the last person to die from smallpox. So for thousands of years, smallpox was really a horrible and contagious disease that caused the illness and deaths of so many people. According to the CDC, 3 out of 10 people succumbed to the disease, while those who managed to survive it were left with permanent scars or had to live the rest of their days blind. Governments from all around the world worked really hard to completely eradicate the Red Plague, and thanks to aggressive vaccine campaigns, the World Health Organization certified the infectious diseases global eradication in 1980, the year I was born, thank goodness. So the last recorded patient to perish from smallpox was medical photographer Janet Parker, who worked at the medical school of the University of Birmingham. Despite receiving a vaccine against the virus in 1966, she unfortunately got infected with it in 1978. Samples of the virus, which were being studied in one of the university's labs, found their ways into the air system and made contact with Parker through the vents in her workspace. Following her unfortunate demise, stricter rules were implemented in terms of how laboratories handled dangerous diseases. So in conclusion, wise men say that the only constant thing, well, is change. And so instead of evading or resisting it, I think we just need to embrace it. And the point of all these historical firsts and famous lasts is really to remember where we were and where we intend to go next as we continue to move forward in this challenging and crazy life altogether. Alright guys, thank you all so much for watching today's video. I'll see you later.